In mid-September of 1914, the Western Front stretched in a continuous line that started in the Syrian frontier, continued approximately in the French border between France and Germany in La Salle-d'Auray, and penetrated in France in a straight line between Lochy-Verdun until the mouth of the river Oise. In this war of positions, a new element was introduced, and that later will become obsessively familiar in the battlefields of the Western Front: the trenches. The Germans started excavating them between the 11th and 15th of September, creating an unassailable position for the slow and Guarani's units. At first, the trenches were primitive and improvised. They were simple pits without conditioning. However, the improvement will come some weeks later with the integrated networks of fortified trenches. As the mobility of the units and the slow movement of large marches due to autumnfall were obvious, the next movement was the so-called race toward the sea. This name was given to an attempt of both sides to fill the empty space that were in the Somme Valley and Flanders. Both groups discovered that this empty flank could be used for groping the enemy. So this empty space was also important, as it controlled the communication between France and Britain in the English Channel. However, this never happened as the two armies reached the sea at the same time, so almost 400 kilometers of trenches were formed. The most important defensive system in the war was the use of trenches. At first, they were simple ditches made in land and rock. Later, the implementation of sacks were made the trenches were solid and resistant for bombs and rain. Finally, the trenches were paneled with wooden planks, and they were not made straight for avoiding the bombs. Also, some concrete rooms were made. Finally, some barriers were placed facing them for slowing the progression of the enemies. These trench systems had been used before, especially for avoiding the firearm weapon. These trenches could be divided in three differentiated parts: the front, which was the direct fighting line, which was the most dangerous one, then the support line or second line, where most of the weapons were placed, and finally the reserve line or the third line. During the service periods, all units were rotated in all trenches lines. The daily life in the trenches during 1914 and 1918 was really difficult. The appearance of rats among the detritus and the dead bodies of men and animals was a health problem. However, the small enemies like the Allies assumed even greater risk of disease. The discomfort of the units could be maximum in rainy or icy periods, causing sometimes various symptoms such as freezing or trench foot. This happened because they had to spend long periods of time in the trenches and exposed to the elements. Nevertheless, the trenches were an important element for the safety of the units. Some important changes were done later for trying to improve the health and comfort by building drainage systems, shelters, latrines, and waste collection.